Next, we have Francesca Farmer from the Royal Albert Memorial Museum and Lucy Hinnie, who is the Topics for Impact Coordinator for Wikimedia UK, and they have a lightning talk, Going Open with GLAM-E Lab and Wikimedia, Developing Tools for Open Culture.
I'm first. Yep. Hi. Good afternoon. I don't know how to follow that, to be honest. We don't have any QR codes, we haven't used AI, and we don't have any sheep. So that's how we open. It's great to be here. I'm Lucy Hinnie. I'm Topics for Impact Coordinator at Wikimedia UK, but last year I had the pleasure of being a Digital Research Fellow at the GLAM-E Lab. And I'm presenting you today with Francesca Farmer, who's going to take us through our first slide.
So I just wanted to explain what the toolkit that we created was. We spent a few years working with some local heritage organisations in the southwest to ascertain what it was that they needed to be able to go open access. So this is the result. We created the Open GLAM toolkit. Sorry, I seem to be squeaking. So it starts with just kind of an introductory, this is what open access is. We then created an internal open access policy, so that's a policy for organisations to have, for them to kind of plan what it is that they wanted to do with their open access work. We then realised that people needed to assess and mitigate risks, so looking at the collections and seeing what can go open access, those that can't go open access, why they can't, if there is a way that you can mitigate that. And then obviously copyright clearance is a big thing with open access, it's the main thing. So we created a copyright clearance handbook and log, followed by an image and metadata handbook for Wikimedia Commons, which basically is a step-by-step guide on how you can upload images onto Wikimedia Commons and its associated metadata. We then have selecting an alternative license or label. So if you can't apply CC0 or a public domain mark, is there an alternative label you could use? And finally, an external open access policy for people to put on their websites. So this basically talks people through the entire process of going open access from start to finish. Why did we choose Wiki? The main reason is that it's free. So the Royal Albert Memorial Museum is a small regional museum that doesn't have a huge budget for any kind of research or work on this level. It's also got a low barrier to entry, so it's quite easy to use, especially for even smaller organisations that might only have volunteers. It's not that difficult to learn. And then you also get a high level of engagement with images. So like Twitter and Blue Sky over here, images can get millions of views depending on which Wikipedia pages they're placed on. And you can also track this so that you can then measure how many views they're getting. And obviously you can reach a global audience. So
I'm going to talk a little bit now about how we developed elements of the toolkit, particularly the image and metadata handbook. I think the first thing we had to go through was determining the audience. So who did we want this support to work for in the first instance? Part of the funding we received was to develop a Southwest Open GLAM network, and this group of I think it was between 5 and 15 organisations were our core audience. We were clear from the outset that we wanted it to work collaboratively and openly. So we wanted to work with people in as transparent of a way as we possibly could. And I'll just give you a moment to appreciate the dog, who's quite cute. He's from the RAM collections, as are almost all of the images we're using today. When it came to drafting the guidelines, this was a really informative process, I think, for all of us involved, because we were working through very granular processes and trying to make them as open and accessible as possible. We developed a unique visual style, as you can see from the, from the slides today. There's a kind of brand identity for the GLAM-E Lab that we wanted to carry through. And we were really looking both at not just technical language, but the intersection of this with the kind of GLAM audience and their familiar vocabulary and what they would be comfortable working within. There was also an element from the wiki side of things of keeping abreast of changes to tools. And I've been sitting in the audience today doing a bit of thinking about wiki, particularly in the face of a lot of conversation about AI. And I think what is if you ask me to describe Wiki in one word, and I'm going to pronounce it really carefully, it would be scrappy. Not it's crappy, scrappy. I think there is something about Wiki that is very powerful in that it is standing in the face of a lot of automated intervention, and Wiki remains very human and very focused on the detail and making the data correct. One of the ways that the alternative version of scrappiness comes up, I think, is in the tools that we use. So the tools are often maintained by the most amazing volunteers, but because they are maintained by volunteers, they're not necessarily as up-to-date as they would be with full funding and investment. The tool that we focused on in the GLAM-E toolkit is Pattypan. If you Google it, you get a picture of a squash, which is slightly annoying. So if you're looking for it, please put in Pattypan, Wikimedia, can I have this tool, please? Because otherwise you'll just get pictures of squashes. Pattypan is a tool that does mass image uploads. It's been very popular in the Wiki community for a number of years, but it is starting to not be the first port of call because it hasn't been updated in a while. Halfway through the drafting of our guidelines, we realised that people were pushing to move more towards OpenRefine. And that's brilliant. OpenRefine has a very bright future ahead of it with Wiki. But we stuck with Pattypan because we wanted this to be as available and as accessible as possible. And the simple fact of it was that Pattypan had a much lower barrier of entry, particularly with the toolkit that we then provided. Encouraging feedback. In both senses of the word, we wanted to have encouraging feedback and we wanted to encourage it. So we asked for support from some critical friends from both museums and the Wiki community. We also asked individual organisations to talk us through some of the co-creation of initial drafts, what was working and what wasn't. Francesca and I had a lot of calls where we would sit with someone from an organisation and literally walk them through the process to make sure that the instructions made sense. A short case study here of the Image and Metadata Handbook is essentially, it was a collaboration between GLAM-E and Wikimedia UK. We wanted to demystify Pattypan and Wikimedia Commons and focus on those low-hanging fruit. The results were pretty spectacular. We got 2,110 images up, over 13 partners, and there have been over 16 million views of images from RAM alone from 2023 to now, which is an enormous amount of coverage for a relatively mid-sized museum. I'm going to pass over now to Francesca, who's going to talk a little bit about what comes next for both the toolkit and the GLAM-E lab.
So Lucy mentioned OpenRefine. We are considering integrating OpenRefine into the toolkit if there are people who are techier and want to release images open access onto Wiki. It does have some benefits to it in that it is easier to integrate Wikidata and Wiki templates into the upload process, and it also streamlines the process a bit more than Pattypan does. And secondly, we are hoping to create a modular interactive web version of the entire toolkit. It says in 2026, that's definitely not going to happen in 2026. It'd be more likely to happen in 2027. But this would kind of have a logic tree where people come in at a specific point, they select the options that apply to them, and at the end, there will be like a custom-made PDF that they can generate. So those are kind of the two key things that we want to work on. Here are some other resources that we've made over the last few years. If you Google them, they will come up. We should have made a QR code. Didn't really think about that. And yeah, that's it really. Here are our email addresses if you want to get in touch. Again, no QR code, so you will just have to type it down. And thank you very much for listening.